The first time Marcus Adler walked into the interspecies campus medical wing, he wasn't bleeding. That would come later. For now, he was just early, a little unsure, and carrying a paper bag with a ham and cheese sandwich. "Third door on your left," the reception drone chirped. "Instructor registration." Marcus gave a thumbs up. "Thanks, buddy." The hall smelled faintly of disinfectant and something not quite garlic but close. He passed a tall, statuesque being with pale green skin and 4 eyes that blinked in alternating patterns. It nodded politely. Marcus nodded back, clutching his sandwich tighter. He found the room. Inside, 3 other instructors were already seated around a long table, none of them human. One, with a shimmering exosuit and a voice like running water, introduced herself as Salari. Another, a squat, bark-skinned creature with glowing fingertips, was Nock. The third, tall and thin with a face like melted glass, gave no name, only a series of tones. "Marcus Adler," he said, pulling out a chair. "From Earth, biology and minor field medicine." Salari tilted her head. "Earth. The war-resilient species. You sustain bodily harm frequently, yes," he laughed. "Not intentionally, we just don't quit easy." Nock's fingertips glowed a curious orange. "Is that why your species is statistically overrepresented in high-risk occupations?" "Probably," Marcus said, unwrapping his sandwich. "We're not great at long-term planning." The glass-faced one made a sound like a flute solo. Salari translated. "He says he finds your honesty refreshing." "Glad to be of service," Marcus said through a mouthful of sandwich. That was his first week at Interstellar Academic Cohort 9, a sprawling orbital learning facility orbiting a gas giant whose name Marcus could neither pronounce nor spell. The students were from over 70 planets, ranging from water world dwellers to methane breathers. Marcus had 23 in his advanced anatomy class, only 2 of whom had ever seen a human before. His classroom was a modified lab with adaptive climate zones. On the 3rd day of instruction, a student named Yiln accidentally triggered the internal gravity calibration trying to download a dissection module. The floor flipped, 3 chairs stuck to the ceiling, and Marcus dislocated his shoulder. "Stay calm," he grunted, lying flat on the floor. Yiln hit the red override button. "No, the one that says manual in English. That's it." The room spun, gravity normalized, and Nock, who had arrived to observe, helped Marcus to his feet. "Your limb," Nock said, eyes glowing faint green. "It is detached, just dislocated," Marcus muttered. "Not a huge deal." He guided his arm back into position with a grunt and a pop loud enough to make 2 students faint. One vomited. "Okay," Marcus said, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Let's take 5. Afterwards, he spent 10 minutes explaining that no, this did not mean humans could reattach limbs at will, and no, he didn't do that for fun. Still, word spread. Students began asking questions about human pain tolerance, bone density, and whether humans could actually survive falls from 5 stories. Marcus clarified in increasingly exasperated tones that they could not. It was 2 weeks later that it happened. The anatomy class was dissecting a simulated hybrid lifeform. Marcus leaned over one of the tables, peering at a student's scalpel angle. "You want to come in just under the fibrous tissue like this," he gestured, and as he bent forward to demonstrate, he felt a sudden warmth at the base of his nose. He sniffed once. Then again. Blood dripped onto the simulation tray. A second later, chaos erupted. Yiln screamed a high-pitched whine like a malfunctioning airlock and launched backwards into a wall. Salari, who had been auditing the class, knocked over 2 chairs trying to reach the emergency panel. The glass-faced observer emitted a shrieking tone that made 3 lights explode. Everyone calm down," Marcus shouted, pinching his nose. "It's just a nosebleed," students scattered. One dropped to the floor, shielding its head. Another curled into a fetal position, muttering in its native tongue. Yiln had climbed half into a ventilation duct. "I'm not dying," Marcus called. "Seriously, it's fine," Salari turned, eyes wide. "You are hemorrhaging from the face. It's just a nosebleed." Marcus repeated, still pinching his nostrils. Happens sometimes, dry air, stress, altitude. Whatever. The room was still vibrating from the glass-faced being's alarm tone. Somebody hit the ventilation override, Marcus said. Yiln's going to get stuck. Knock arrived moments later, radio in hand. Is it a weapon discharge? Marcus shook his head. Nosebleed. Knock stared. You are bleeding. That's what a nosebleed is, Knock. I was not informed humans bled from the head casually. It's not casual, Marcus snapped. It's just not fatal. He sat down, holding a tissue to his face. Solari finally approached carefully as if he might explode. You are calm, she said, trying to be, Marcus muttered. Hurts a little, she crouched beside him. You are not in danger of expiration. No, I've had these since I was a kid. She looked unconvinced. You were injured regularly as a juvenile? Yeah, I mean, not on purpose, just happens. Solari stood slowly, turned to the class, and announced something in a series of rapid clicks and hisses that Marcus couldn't follow. The students began to re-emerge from hiding spots. Yiln dropped out of the vent with a thud. He is not dying. No, Marcus said. And I'd appreciate it if someone grabbed me an electrolyte pack. I'm feeling a little lightheaded. The class resumed 10 minutes later. Marcus insisted on finishing the demonstration. His voice was nasal and his hand shook slightly, but the students watched with rapt attention, even Yiln, who refused to sit closer than 5 feet. The next day, a pamphlet appeared in the common area. Human Injury Events, What to Expect. It featured a cartoon Marcus pointing at his nose with a caption that read, Relax, it's just a nosebleed. I didn't approve this, Marcus muttered, holding the flyer. Solari shrugged. It's educational. I look like a clown. She tilted her head. Is that a respected medical figure on your world? No. 2 weeks later, Marcus had to cancel class due to an actual concussion. A storage container malfunctioned and dropped a crate of flex glass onto his shoulder and head. He was hospitalized for 3 days. Solari visited on the 2nd day. She handed him a data slate with several student messages. Most were elaborate apologies. One included a poem titled Ode to the Bleeding Man. Marcus read in silence. Solari finally asked, You are recovering, slowly, he said. Doctors say I was lucky. You were struck in the head by a falling object. That does not sound lucky. It didn't crush me, that's the lucky part. Solari studied him. Your species is very strange. Thanks. No. I mean it sincerely. He smiled faintly when Marcus returned to class the following week, bandages still covering the side of his scalp. The students stood as one. Knock had apparently instructed them in Earth customs. Marcus raised an eyebrow. What is this? Solari stepped forward. A gesture of respect for the one who bleeds but does not fall. That sounds more dramatic than it needs to. She handed him a small, sealed container. Inside was a synthetic nose the size and shape of his own mounted on a stand. Marcus blinked. What is this? A teaching aid, she said earnestly, so future students will not panic if you bleed again. He looked at the silicone nose, then at the class. Well, he said, I guess I should be flattered. Do not worry, Yiln said solemnly. This time, if you bleed, we will only scream internally. Marcus chuckled. Progress. The semester continued with fewer incidents. The nosebleed was still legendary. Students whispered about it in the cafeteria. And someone wrote a ballad, but no one fled the room the next time Marcus scraped his hand during a sample prep. Small victories. By finals, the anatomy students could identify over 60 hybrid structures without flinching. Yiln even approached Marcus after class one day. I wish to study Earth emergency medicine, he said. Marcus blinked. Really? Yes, you survived so many injuries. I wish to learn from you. Marcus smiled, touched. Well, start with never panicking at a nosebleed. That's lesson 1. Yiln nodded solemnly. Understood. And when Marcus left that year, the faculty presented him with a plaque. It read, Marcus Adler, instructor, biologist, and survivor of the Great Facial Hemorrhage. He hung it in his Earth apartment above the couch, where only a few friends ever asked about it. And when they did, he'd just say, "You had to be there." The morning after the mid-cycle evaluations, Marcus sat at his desk sipping something that claimed to be coffee but tasted like brine and burnt mushrooms. He didn't complain. You learned quickly in the outer academic colonies that taste was subjective, and caffeine was gold. His office window looked out over a vast vacuum-sealed courtyard where students floated in low gravity, gently bouncing from one learning module to another. One pair was practicing emergency decompression drills, muffled laughter vibrating through their helmet comms. A soft knock chirped at the door. "Enter," Marcus called. The door hissed open to reveal Yiln, hunched slightly as always, large eyes blinking at asynchronous intervals. They clutched a thin black case that looked like it was never meant to be handled by anything with fingers. "You said I could assist with the dermal regeneration case this week." "I did. You're early. I find it reduces uncertainty." Marcus gestured to the second chair. "Sit." "I'm reviewing the intake notes. Subject's a Yiln with photosensitive dermis, injured during a scavenging module." Yiln opened the case. Inside was a diagnostic tool modified with 3 different scalpel extensions and a sensor array Marcus didn't recognize. The student noticed his glance. "I added a thermal differentiator calibrated for human baseline. It should help identify microabrasions on non-native tissue." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "You did that overnight." "I didn't sleep." "That's not a badge of honor, Yiln." "I was not seeking one." Marcus leaned back in his chair. "Let me guess, you read all the Earth trauma literature?" "I read the translated abstracts. Full texts are restricted," he sighed. "I'll put in a request." "You're not going to learn anything useful if all you read is summary speculation by scholars who have never actually seen a human bruise." Yiln blinked twice. "You think our understanding is flawed. I think your researchers once called a fever thermal rage syndrome and recommended removal of the affected limb." "I see." They sat in silence for a moment, the hum of the wall circulators filling the space. "Do you still experience discomfort from the cranial impact?" Yiln asked. "Only when I argue with administrative AI. Does it cause cranial pressure?" "No, just moral erosion." Yiln tilted their head. "That was a joke." "Correct. I am becoming more skilled at identifying them." "Impressive." The door chimed again, and this time the medbay assistant, a tall, amphibious being named Dree, rolled in with the patient on a floating gurney. The Yiln was wrapped in a reflective sheet that shimmered like oil on water. They were semi-conscious, their skin peeling in long, translucent strips. "Subject was exposed to direct UV for 13 seconds, Dree explained. "No protective film." They were attempting to retrieve a dropped ocular interface. Marcus scanned them briefly. "Surface burn, 2nd degree, minor fluid loss. We'll need to irrigate and apply synthetic epithelium." Dree nodded. "Assistants?" "Just one today." Yiln stood, already activating the thermal module on their tool. Marcus pulled on gloves. "All right, let's keep exposure minimal. No sudden temperature changes." Yiln, irrigate with the saline blend. "Not Sector 12's formula. It reacts with Yiln dermis and smells like rotting kelp." Yiln paused. "Why is that formula still in circulation?" "Because half the budget committee thinks smell doesn't matter if it's sterile." Yiln worked silently, hands steady. The patient hissed once but didn't move. The saline pulsed evenly across the wound, clearing away flakes of damaged tissue. Marcus adjusted the lighting, dimming it to 10%. "Good. Now the epithelium layer." "Gently, like you're painting over damp paper." Yiln's fingers moved with surprising delicacy for someone who once mistook a blood pressure cuff for a tourniquet. The layer settled onto the burn, conforming to the patient's ridged skin in seconds. Marcus watched closely. "You didn't oversaturate." "Nice work." Yiln's shoulders relaxed just slightly. The Yiln murmured something low and fragmented. "They're asking if this is the part where you remove the skin entirely," Dree translated. Marcus sighed. "Tell them no." "That's a myth." They said the last human they met said you molt as a healing mechanism. That human lied. Understood. The treatment finished in under 20 minutes. The Yiln was resting comfortably, skin already beginning to regenerate in smooth, iridescent layers. As Dree wheeled the gurney away, Yiln turned to Marcus. I did not expect the dermal tissue to react so quickly to the synthetic layer. Marcus nodded. We spent years developing that compound. Half the work was just making sure it didn't trigger a stress molt. There are species where stress causes the outer skin to detach, yes, and one where it hardens into a protective shell. They call it emergency ossification, very inconvenient in tight corridors. Yiln looked contemplative. Do humans have a similar mechanism? No, we just scream internally and eat carbohydrates. I see. Marcus removed his gloves and tossed them into the disposal chute. You handled yourself well. Controlled, quiet, no unnecessary movement. I was trying not to mimic your earlier incidents, Marcus chuckled. Good instinct. Yiln hesitated, then asked, are humans always so casual during direct tissue interaction? We can't afford not to be. Panic slows the hands, even when you are injured, especially then. Yiln folded the diagnostic tool back into its case. I believe I understand. You treat the body like a system, not a vessel, Marcus blinked. That's not how we'd put it, but yeah. That's fair. I would like to observe a human emergency response in its native environment. That's a bold request. I believe it would clarify many misconceptions. Marcus rubbed the bridge of his nose. All right, I'll see if I can get a training sim approved, but no promises. Earth protocols can be unpredictable. I have already started studying the language of Earth paramedics. You what? I located several archived audio logs. Many contain the phrase, we're gonna need more gauze. True. That's practically our motto. Later that afternoon, during faculty prep, Marcus found himself in the main lab again, calibrating a new batch of tissue simulators. The AI had requested updates for the human modules, claiming the current ones were emotionally inappropriate. Celery passed by, pausing briefly. I heard you managed the burn case without incident. No fainting, no screaming, no attempted ventilation crawling. Progress. Yiln handled most of it. He has become fixated. Marcus didn't look up. He's curious. That's not a crime. It is not. But his interest borders on reverence. He's just trying to understand a system that doesn't make sense to him. Celery leaned against the console. You do realize your species is viewed as anomalous, even among anomaly-rich civilizations. I've picked up on that. You don't regenerate. You don't have exoskeletons. You're soft, fragile, inefficient, and yet you persist. Appreciate the pep talk. And when you bleed from the face, you continue teaching anatomy. Marcus looked up from the simulator. You think we're reckless. I think you're impossible. That's better than irrelevant. Celery studied him, then nodded once and left without another word. At exactly 22 hours later, Yiln returned with a stack of data slates and a request form. Marcus didn't read it right away. He was focused on a stubborn tissue model that refused to simulate bruising without exploding. I've compiled incident reports from 6 human space stations, Yiln said, all involving pressure injuries, blunt trauma, and fire response. Marcus glanced up. You're building a pain response profile? I am attempting to identify thresholds. That's not standardized. Pain is subjective. I understand, but your tolerances are consistently higher than expected. Marcus sighed. We don't have natural armor. So we adapted behaviorally. Yiln placed the final data slate on the bench. I wish to request permission to observe a controlled pain test. You want me to let someone hurt me? No, I want to see how you respond to discomfort you cannot control. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Yiln, that's not how human ethics work. I apologize. I did not intend to request harm, only observation. Marcus leaned back. You want to see what happens when something doesn't go right, that it? Yes, I believe. That is where the truth of a species resides. He stared at the student for a long moment. Then, quietly, I'll think about it. Yiln blinked. Thank you. When the lab finally dimmed for rest cycle, Marcus sat alone with the failing simulator, rubbing a forming bruise on his palm. He hadn't told anyone he'd gotten his hand caught in the pressure lock earlier that day. Might as well wait and see how it looked in the morning. Maybe Yiln was right. Maybe what mattered wasn't how often they got hurt, but how they chose to keep going. The simulation chamber at the east wing of the medical research deck was colder than necessary. Marcus adjusted his sleeves as he stepped through the decontamination arc, watching the fog evaporate from his forearms. The lights overhead dimmed to accommodate the artificial dusk cycle, but the room's central dome glowed, faintly indicating the simulation was preloaded. Inside, a full human emergency response drill had been coded from old Earth paramedic archives. Marcus had spent the better part of the last week filing clearance reports just to get the scenario approved. Not because it was dangerous, though it involved a compound fracture and a simulated seizure, but because the review committee couldn't agree on whether Earth-based pain responses could be ethically replicated. Yiln stood near the observation console, already logged in, posture stiff, but composed. Their usual assortment of diagnostic tools had been replaced with a single analysis slate. No case, no thermal module, no sensor gloves, just data and eyes. "You're early again," Marcus said, stepping beside them. "You said the simulation would begin 120 seconds after arrival." "I needed time to calibrate baseline readings." Marcus tapped the dome with 2 fingers. "You ready to see what a real mess looks like?" Yiln's gaze didn't shift. "Yes." Marcus entered the simulation chamber. The door sealed behind him with a hiss, and the environment adjusted instantly. Fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, the faint scent of antiseptic and burned wiring thick in the air. A crash echoed from the far left. The scene was underway. A simulated human lay on the floor beside a toppled scaffolding unit, leg bent unnaturally, blood pooling under the thigh. Another avatar knelt nearby, face pale, cradling a visibly dislocated shoulder and mumbling incoherently. A third figure stood frozen, shouting into a comm unit that wasn't transmitting. Marcus dropped to his knees beside the one with the fracture. Pulse. The simulator's HUD displayed vitals, but Marcus ignored them. "Hey, you with me? Can you hear me?" The avatar twitched, then groaned. He turned toward the onlookers. "Get that comm working. You find a splint. Improvised if you have to." Yiln watched from the dome's exterior, noting every movement, every expression. They didn't speak. Marcus removed his belt, looping it just above the fracture. "This is going to hurt," he said to the avatar, "but it'll keep you from bleeding out before evac." The simulated patient screamed when the belt tightened, body arching, breath sharp and ragged. Marcus didn't flinch. He adjusted the leg slightly, aligning the ends of the broken bone just enough to stabilize. The HUD blinked. Pulse steadying. Bleeding controlled. He moved to the second patient, the one with the dislocated shoulder. "Tell me your name," he said, watching the avatar's eyes track him. "Squeeze my hand." The fingers didn't move. "Okay," Marcus muttered. "Nerve pressure." He pressed along the clavicle, found the tension, and with a quick movement rotated the arm back into socket. Another scream. The fingers spasmed and finally closed around his. He sat back on his heels, exhaling. "Simulation complete," the overhead AI announced. The lights brightened. The injured avatars vanished. Marcus stepped out through the decontamination arc again. Yiln was waiting, slate filled with data graphs. "You didn't hesitate," they said. "There's no room for it. You induced pain deliberately." "I prevented more by doing it. That's the trade-off." Yiln blinked slowly. "You touched the simulated wound with bare hands, adjusted the fracture, initiated reduction without anesthetic. It's a simulator, but yes. That's what we do when there's no time." They studied the slate for a moment. "Your facial expression did not change during any of it. You don't get to look horrified and expect others to stay calm. Pain's part of it, but panic, that's optional." Yiln set the slate down. "I understand now why your injuries are frequent." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Because we're reckless. No, because you refuse to delay. They paused, then added, I thought I could understand your tolerance by observing thresholds, but it's not about the threshold. It's about the refusal to stop at it. Marcus leaned against the frame of the dome. That's closer to the truth than most get. Yiln looked up. I will revise my research proposal. No more pain thresholds. I'll study response patterns instead, situational choices. Behavioral prioritization under pressure. Marcus nodded. That's actually useful. Yiln retrieved the slate. May I submit the simulation data to the interspecies medical archive? You think they'll approve it? They approved the nose model. Marcus chuckled. Fair point. They exited the chamber together, the lights behind them dimming as the system powered down. Later that cycle, over lukewarm nutrient broth in the faculty lounge, Solari approached Marcus with a medpad. She offered it without preamble. Yiln requested you as a co-author. Marcus took the pad, reading the working title aloud. Adaptation Beyond Anatomy, a preliminary study of human emergency behavior. Catchy. He submitted it to the joint symposium. Marcus blinked. The one on Zorthan's moon. Yes. He believes your presence will lend credibility, he scoffed. I'm not a research celebrity. Solari tilted her head. You're the only instructor who's bled in 3 different classrooms. Marcus tapped the pad thoughtfully. All right, I'll do it. Solari hesitated before turning. You know, when Yiln first asked to study humans, I thought he was indulging a passing curiosity. And now, he isn't just studying your pain, he's studying your patience. Marcus looked down at the medpad again. It's not always easy. No. But you didn't flinch when he asked you to. That evening, Marcus walked the outer ring corridor alone. The stars beyond the transparent wall drifted slowly as the station rotated. A pair of students passed, chattering in a dialect he didn't recognize. One of them nodded at him. He nodded back. His leg still ached faintly from the pressure lock incident days ago. He hadn't bothered with treatment, just compression and elevation. It would heal. Things usually did. Back in his quarters, he hung the co-authorship confirmation beside the plaque from the anatomy class. 2 strange honors, side by side. One for surviving a nosebleed, the other for deliberately inducing trauma in a simulation. He poured himself a cup of something vaguely resembling tea and sat down. No alarms. No injuries. No students hiding in vents, just quiet for now.